Check. Check.
Check.
Hey, I can hear you.
All right, the video. Can you hear the drum?
No, but you're still latent.
Yeah, it's the camera because I just opened a QuickTime recording and tried to do it with no network connection at all, and it's the same delay.
Weird. Cannot hear drums.
Okay, well, it's not a big deal.
Although it'll be weird to do this with a delay. Do you have delay normally when you do Zoom?
I don't know. I'm never looking at myself. I'm usually sharing screen.
Oh. Didn't someone tell you? Someone that's like on your class or whatever?
No, they don't tell me anything. They never talk. They just turn off their cameras. I don't even know if they're there. I hate it.
Yeah, that does suck, man. I don't really do Zoom meetings, because I kept going to work. So you can't do that in real life, I found out. I tried that once. Like I brought a kind of like a dentist dummy situation of me, set it there. No one was fooled. Well, they were for a little bit. Does that guitar look classic enough?
What guitar? Oh, nice.
Put my guitar back there. So it looks...
That's a beautiful guitar. I should bring mine in.
It is a good looking guitar. So basically you want to start the show like Wayne's World. You got the guitar in your lap and you're going "Ba-na-na-na, Wayne's World." So good. All right. I'll be back in a minute. Nicole just texted. Let's see what she said. Oh, she's here. All right, let me go up and check in with her and make sure we're all good, then we can do it.
Okay.
Wow, you're really good. Barstow.
What?
Sounds like something that would be in Barstow, a song about Barstow, and it'd be some real crappy lyrics about getting crabs from some woman at Barstow or something.
No, it's
What was that?
Boston, you, Massachusetts.
What was? Didn't in Barstow he say the word Barstow or something, and it was really funny? Remember?
You're thinking of Public Enemy. Sometimes they would say the name of the band, or their own name. Sometimes they would just refer to themselves.
Yeah, but didn't you? I swear, didn't you have Barstow on your qual exam? Your quals?
Yeah.
I thought he said Barstow somewhere in it, like Barstow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he must.
And it was like, I always thought it was so awkward and cheesy and dumb, to be frank. But don't tell him I said that. Who was that? Was that Parch? Who was it that wrote that?
Yeah, it was Parch. But for some reason, when you said that, I only thought of the other meaning of the word, like when you're really thirsty.
What?
Parch? Like when you're
like
parched?
You're parched. I thought it was like you were using the word Barstow that way. Like, man, I'm Barstowed.
I do.
I'm like,
sometimes.
oh, you're thirsty?
Really could use a sip right now. I'm Barstowed.
I'm so Barstowed. We should try and get that going because that was such a popular work in a totally niche area of a totally niche market. So
sometimes I say I'm all Barstowed out.
Man, I wish you could fix that delay. It's really annoying. I feel like I'm interacting with a ghost of Josh or something.
See, I'm not even looking at you. I've got so much going on my screen.
Well, how do you know what I'm saying?
I'm just listening.
I got nothing on my screen.
I'm using my ears.
Are you gonna do any like screen sharing for this or whatever?
No, I'm not planning on it. I just I'm really like pandemic has made me so much more ADHD than ever before. So I just have to have things to look at. So I'm going to be checking Facebook and stuff while we're talking.
Oh, that sounds good. You know what? I'll do the same.
I'm going to live tweet it on Facebook. Can you tweet?
Like, this conversation sucks. Hashtag live tweet. And then Facebook's like, what are you talking about?
Oh, I missed it.
Oh, you can do like you can add like what's his name? What is it in Parks and Rec? China Joe, when he's like, China Joe, you're hilarious, and he just looks over at him all menacingly. So this is going to be the hard part about starting a podcast: is how do we start? When do we? Yeah. When am I like getting into different mental zone? Do we get into a different place? I don't know. Should we do a welcome?
Yeah, I was like, should we introduce ourselves? Like, what are we?
Yeah, and what are we introducing ourselves as? Maybe we should just do a basic introduction, and then part of the podcast is us talking about what the heck it even is. I don't even know at this point.
All right, I'm Josh. What else? What should I say?
Should you say a last name? I feel like you don't want to let your last name go anymore on the internet. You know what I mean? Because,
well, I mean, your last
name.
I think it's going to be out there, but it just feels weird. It feels very formal to say Josh Harris.
Oh, is it because they might mistake you for that Christian author? Who's no longer a Christian, by the way. I think your name is cursed.
There's also a quarterback. You know the professor at BGSU, Marilyn Shrewd. Yeah. When I met her, she said, "Oh, you have the same name as an NFL quarterback."
How would she know that?
I know she doesn't seem like a football fan, but why is that? Why wouldn't she seem like that?
I don't know. I studied with her for a year. She just didn't. Sports never came up. She didn't seem to be into sports. You know what time she wakes up to compose in the morning? 4.
Yeah,
It was always fun though, because by the time at the end of any evening concert, she would always fall asleep. Well, I guess if you're up at 4 and you're going to a boring concert till like 9:30, which most of them were.
I used to sit in the back when I was an undergrad. I would sit in the back of the hall because the chairs were right up against the brick wall, and I would just lean my head back against that wall and go to sleep.
That's a pretty good tactic. What would I do? I don't know. In my undergrad, I was a part of the production crew, so I worked a lot of the concerts. So, no joke though, I did fall asleep at a concert once when I was supposed to be working.
Yeah.
And it was an orchestra concert. It was the last orchestra concert of the year. And it was also somehow during, I don't know, Dead Week. Do you guys still call it that? You know, the week before finals week, where kind of like they don't really give you homework and stuff to prep for finals.
Right.
And you're not supposed to have concerts during that week either, but they had an orchestra concert that week that I was working, and my only job was to move the curtain for the conductor.
Right.
That's it. That was my whole job. I did great the first time when I let him out. But then when the concert was going on, I was back there by myself. I fell asleep, and we had headsets, a ClearCom system from the front where they would call it, because I can't see out there. So the person in the front would be like, okay, open the curtain now. And I'd open it. So I'm like, well, you know what I'll do? I'll just lay here in the middle of the floor and I'll have my headset on. And of course, when the orchestra stops playing, I'll be able to hear him. Dude, I must have fallen into a super deep sleep because I woke up with the orchestra conductor looking over me and like another person looking over me like I was on my back. It was like in the movies, you know, whenever someone wakes up and people are standing over him and it's that camera view from the bottom up.
You were on your back.
It was just like that. I went,
what were you?
And he's like, man, you must be tired. And I was like, oh, he had come back, opened his own curtain, then went back out and did a curtain and a second, opened his own curtain, then came back, opened his curtain again, and then was standing over me. Anyway, he was a super nice guy. He was actually was funny. He was also a violin professor. So he was also a part of my juries at the end of every semester. Because we had a really small department. It was like guitar, violin, and cello. That was the string jury that I would perform in front of. And he always gave me good marks. So he didn't hold it against me.
Yeah, he sounds cool. But I just feel bad for him that he had to open his own curtain. Like, that's just so embarrassing. for a conductor to have to part the.
Yeah, well, it's on the side. It's hard to see. It wasn't really that obvious.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Well, hey, so maybe
Oh yeah,
tell us about where you went to school and
welcome
what's your background
to our podcast. My name is Patrick. Should I look up at the camera? Where am I looking here?
I'm not.
I don't think anyone understands how any of this is supposed to work. Okay, so yeah, my name's Patrick. I have been to 3 universities. Between the two of us, what is it? 6 degrees in 5 universities.
6 degrees of that should be the name of the podcast. 6 degrees of something.
Dude, 6 degrees of wasted money. No, that's not good. 6 degrees of sadness. 6 degrees, almost like you want it to be like a loop, because our show's really gonna loop back a lot. So it's like 6 degrees of 6 degrees.
Oh,
because we're always a degree away from something in our conversation, and yet we have 6 degrees.
How many 6 degrees can you have in a circle? 30? Is that no? How I'm not doing that math right. 60. 60.
Do you mean 360 divided by 6?
Yeah.
I can't do that type of math in my head.
This is how I compose, though. I just start figuring out. I use numbers, and I'm like, what's the relationship? And then I make it really complicated, and then you can't hear any of it in the music.
Yeah, it just sounds like structure, where he's like, dude, I'm gonna write a piece where every note has been predetermined, and then you hear it and you're like, this just sounds random. So well done. I could have just written anything. By the way, what blows my mind? Do you ever feel this? I've had teachers tell me this, that every generation feels dumber than the previous generation. Do you feel like I don't feel like I'm as smart as my teachers were? And when I've talked to some of them, well, at least the ones that
they confirm that.
But could you imagine studying with dude, I have not talked about classical music in a long time. Boulez, can you imagine being like, oh, you wrote this piece, and then you're like, okay, well, that was kind of insane. But then, who was it? Was it Ligeti that he did some really big analysis of it that got into whatever, that German theory magazine? And
yeah,
it was groundbreaking.
Is that the name? I'm going to Google it.
Yeah. Yeah, it means the death. No, I don't think that's what it means. What does it mean? Did you say diarrhea?
Yeah, here, just I don't know if you can hear this. Oh, I thought it would play it. I thought you could click on that pronunciation in Google and it would play it. But it means the row. Oh, the series. Yeah, the row, of course.
Oh, that would make sense.
That's ridiculous.
So dumb. So subservient.
Not the heart, not the brain, not the body, not art, nothing of substance.
Not the soul.
The row. So structuralist.
The row. Could you imagine being the one guy who's like, you guys, I really like the sounds here. I just don't really I don't like the row. And they're like, get out. Then they throw you to death.
And so I think it's Die Reihe, but except with a rolled R. My German's not great, but I think it's that if it's EI, you always say the second letter.
Yeah, I never took any German.
Die Reihe.
Yeah, if you just spit it out, I'm sure that's pretty close. And you have to make it sound threatening and a little angry. Anyway, that's how I feel about that. Okay, so on this podcast, or whatever it's called, we're going to discuss matters that may or may not pertain to everyday Americans. Probably won't.
It sounds so big, so important.
But it's anti-important, I think it's really an anti-important podcast. That could be a good name of it. 6 degrees of anti-importance. No, that sounds too academic.
Do you ever hear Coggle's anti-opera? Ligeti wanted to do an anti-opera, but then Coggle had already done it. So So Ligeti did an anti opera. He had the
What
best
was that?
sense of humor. Le Grand Macabre.
Oh yeah, I remember that vaguely. What was Kagel's? Kegel? Like the maneuver?
The maneuver? Yeah, I feel like you're a submarine captain. You're like, prepare to execute a Kegel on the count of 3, 2.
The Kegel maneuver. There was like a. Do you remember this comedian? He's my favorite stand-up comedian. Wow, I can't remember any names right now.
We'll just edit that out.
Okay, good. But we won't. That will be one of those people that says we'll just edit that out, but then we don't. And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, nice joke." Late 90s, early 2000s, transvestite British man.
Yeah.
Dang
it.
Yeah, see?
Eddie Izzard.
Eddie Izzard.
Yeah.
He's an executive transvestite, according to his own label.
Yeah, right. Right.
That one, Circles, is one of my all-time favorite things in the world. And he was talking about the Heimlich maneuver. He's like, how did he develop that? And he's like talking about the process. And I'm like, and someone else goes, well, would you really call it a maneuver? He's like, no, I wouldn't call it a maneuver. It's really more of a gesture at this point.
Heimlich gesture.
That was probably the funniest thing I've ever seen. And he does a lot of loops in that, a lot of circle backs. Anyway.
Let's talk about the anti thing for a second. Because, when I was growing up, being anti-establishment, like if you're like David Letterman, for example, you've got this TV show that's really popular and makes a lot of money, but your whole premise is that you're making fun of TV shows, right? You're like the anti-TV TV show.
Mm-hmm.
What is that about? I mean, that's like an aesthetic that's run with me my whole life. But I think
that's interesting.
I think it's a little passé now.
Yeah, I mean, because it was this year talking about something that like came into vogue in the 90s with the Gen X. That was like their whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like redates and like, everyone had long hair and looked like Chris Cornell kind of, which is awesome. I think that's a good look for men and people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like that whole movement. I have a cousin who was really anti-establishment musician in Seattle in the early 90s. Like he was a part of all that stuff. And it's funny because he truly was anti-establishment. Every time he would get in a band that would start to see success, I feel like he would just quit that band and start a new one that sucked and had no traction.
He wasn't going to sell out. He was just...
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Selling out was such a big thing. And it's funny, the idea of selling out, because I think that's why Sub Pop was so popular, because it was like a label that you could get produced on, and it technically didn't sell out because it's like local Seattle, you know what I mean? But as soon as those guys left Sub Pop, then they just out. But it's just so funny because it's like, I mean, from what I've read, it seems like Kurt Cobain was a very driven person, but still anti-establishment. Like, he still cared. You get the sense that he's the type of guy who probably doesn't care about anything. That's the projection.
Yeah, right.
You look at the clothes, you look at the attitude. But I think he deeply cared about his music. That was his aesthetic.
I agree. And I think that I didn't get this as a kid. I didn't get the pop element, the pop aspect of Kurt Cobain's songwriting. He had such a knack for, he had a pop sensibility, and I think it's interesting that when Smells Like Teen Spirit went to number 1, or when the album went to number 1, it displaced Michael Jackson. I think that says a lot. Like, I thought it was revolutionary at the time, but now in retrospect, maybe it wasn't as revolutionary. Maybe they both had a pop sensibility.
Well, but I mean, that's the thing, is it was so like, you look at the form of his songs, he wasn't writing these really long, sprawling things. They were really, I mean, yeah, they were like made for people who like verse, chorus, maybe a bridge, maybe a guitar solo that's just a melody, like in Smells Like Teen Spirit. But everything is like in these small chunks that people can digest, which is exactly what pop music is. I mean, good Lord, when you talk about producing pop, like in pop music, nothing is wasted. If you like add an extra 3-4 bar, instrumental solo, they're like, waste of time, get it out, This is 3 minutes. We can make it 2:45 if we do that. You know, it's like all about trimming all the fat off, because the more fat you have, the more you're going to alienate people out of there. If people check out for 1 second in a song anymore with pop music, you know, it's over. It's like not a good pop song, which is dumb because there's been so many great songs that have been number one that go against that formula.
Right.
But that's like what it is.
You know, my mom was a huge rock fan in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And she introduced us to, you know, Led Zeppelin and Traffic and Eric Clapton and all those bands that had extended solos, or even something like Leonard Skinner, you know, Freebird, right, with that huge solo at the end. And I, you know, when I was a kid, I missed that. I wish that there had been more stuff like that on the radio.
Can you imagine? Isn't it kind of mind blowing that you can still hear on the radio sometimes Freebird? Like, there's not a radio edit.
Is there not?
Still like, there's still like it's like a 7-minute sprawling or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, thing. People love it. People love that guitar at the end, that solo, that huge solo that takes forever. And it kind of defies all the odds, you know. They did make a radio version of Metallica's One, because for the course for that album for them was these really long sprawling songs.
Right.
And they made a shortened version of One for radio. I don't think it gets played much. I think it got more played at the time, but now if someone's going to play One, they're like, just play the whole thing. Who cares? You know?
Yeah. How long is One?
I think it's like 6.5 or 7 minutes.
Yeah. How long's Stairway? I feel like that's the ultimate example of a long hit.
Let's see. I'm not going to look up Stairway, but I'm going to look up One. One is 7:26. That's crazy. I think they probably cut off the first 20 seconds where it's just that sound design stuff, you know, like the machine guns or whatever.
Yeah. 8:02 is Stairway.
Let's see. Freebird is 9 minutes. Is that me?
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just trying to see the time and it had played the track. I don't know why I did that. Hashtag technology.
So, all right. Talk about, do you remember the first time you heard Smells Like Teen Spirit?
Okay, here's the thing about my relationship with Nirvana. By the way, just so everyone knows, maybe we cut this at the beginning. Hi, my name's Patrick, and this is our show. We don't know what it's called yet. We're going to talk about one song and a million other topics. Mostly It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Today's song, or album we're going to discuss, is Nirvana's Nevermind. Breakthrough 1991 smash, starring Kurt Cobain, Dave Grohl, and Chris Novoselic.
Not gonna work here anymore.
Yeah. So our main focus today is, of course, on Nevermind, Nirvana's second album, i.e. everyone thought it was their first album, but did not know about Bleach.
Oh, I had a friend who made it clear to everyone that he had been a fan of Nirvana since Bleach.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I missed that boat. I missed that boat when it happened. I was a little too young. Just a bit. You know, I was like in 7th grade when Kurt Cobain killed himself. So I was like just a little too young and my parents did not educate me in the ways of rock. So I had really no influence on being able to like know what's out there rock wise. My parents listened to country and 80s soft rock kids. I know those pretty well. Growing up, but yeah, so I missed it. So I got into that stuff after he had already died. So I was coming to it just a little bit late.
Oh, that's unfortunately. Yeah. Well, I can't remember. Like I've got a memory in my head, but the years, the math doesn't work. I mean, I remember being in the 6th grade at a school dance, and my buddy had this cassette tape, and he went over, and the PE teacher was DJing it, right? And he goes over and he gives him the cassette. He's like, play this. And I mean, just from that first guitar, everyone stopped and everyone's jaws dropped. And it really was like a life-changing moment. I mean, because I think at the time, all we were hearing at at dances like that was like Color Me Bad. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get the years right. I don't know if Color Me Bad was before or after this, right? But it was that kind of like R&B pop music. And
so your real life experience was the actual video. They just came and filmed your high school with Nirvana.
I'm in the video. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of red-haired people in that video. I remember that.
And you know, I probably listened to it 30 times that first week, just over and over and over.
I mean, like, say what you will. I mean, I've been listening a lot to. So this was what I was telling you before we started that I wanted to discuss was, so you know, it was recorded by Butch Vig, in a couple of different places. There was sort of a first version that was done somewhere in the Midwest, right? And then they went and did it in LA at Sound City with Butch Vig behind the helm with that great Neve console, which is in that Sound City documentary that Dave Grohl put out, Sound City in LA. And Butch Vig recorded it, and then he did a version of all the mixes. He mixed it, and then the company, the label, did not like the mixes. They didn't think they were poppy enough. Like they didn't sound broad enough. So they brought in Andy Wallace to remix all of it, and then he did. So the versions we know are mixed by Andy Wallace. I looked at Andy Wallace's discography last night, and it's like it's some of my favorite records from the 90s. I mean, that dude mixed everything rock in the 90s. It's insane. And so I went back through and listened to. It's a really interesting exercise to listen to the Butch Vig mixes compared to the Andy Wallace mixes. If you go to the Super Deluxe Nirvana release, it's on Spotify, and go to the Devonshire mixes. Those are the Butch Vig mixes, and you can hear some pretty big differences in just the mentality behind the mix. I think Butch Vig's mixes captured the essence of Seattle rock and Nirvana better, but I like how the Andy Wallace mixes sound better. I think they sound bigger. I like it to sound big, and he just nailed the way that mix works. Whereas the Butch Vig it's still big and it sounds great because he recorded it amazingly. It sounds great sonically, but the way he mixed it, it sounds a little more like that Seattle early 90s sound, which always to me sounds like a little more like there's a blanket on the sound, a little more homegrown. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what the Seattle sound was to me.
Can you think of another band or album that sounds like that? Like not the Butch Vig. Oh, I'm sorry. That sounds like the Butch Vig version.
Well, I mean, like I just think of the early Seattle scene, like in the late 80s and 90s. And again, I'm actually recalling back in my mind a lot of the recordings of bands that my cousin was in. You know, he was in that sort of homegrown late 80s, early 90s movement, and I've got some of his recordings of different bands he was in. He was actually in a band with the drummer from Hole, which is weirdly tangential to this conversation, because we'll probably talk later about how Courtney killed Kirk. That's just truth. But it's like maybe like Mudhoney, if you've heard some of their stuff. I don't know. It's not like the real power like grunge stuff. Like when you think about Alice in Chains, or when you think about Soundgarden, those guys were using a lot more gain and like distortion. Mm-hmm. You know,
it was like a metal. Right, that was like an alt metal scene.
Yeah, but the alt sort of rock scene was just a lot different and lo-fi more. It seemed like to me.
You ever hear
it's been years since I've thought about this. So.
Do you remember the Singles soundtrack?
Yeah, I never.
That's how I got in. That's how I know those Seattle bands that never like got big in the mainstream. Like I think Mudhoney's on there, and let me see what else is on there.
I'm looking at it now. Oh yeah, Wood, Alice in Chains, Breath, Pearl Jam, Seasons, Chris Cornell.
Paul Westerberg. That was one of my favorites. Hendrix. Like I didn't realize Hendrix was from Seattle. I mean, you don't usually associate him with Seattle, but
there's a Mother Love Bone on there and a Mudhoney.
Yeah.
Screaming Trees.
Mother Love Bone. Yeah, I love that early early pre Eddie Vedder stuff. I guess that's it.
Yeah, but I would, man, I'll tell you, if anyone ever listens to this and you have a chance to sit down with, it's actually really interesting with a pair of headphones because you can actually hear a lot more of the spatialization more acutely. You know, the part in Smells Like Teen Spirit, the pre-chorus where he's saying hello, hello, hello.
Right.
I've never noticed this, but you know, in the Wallace version, did you know that that's panned back and forth between your ears? Like it starts out here, hello, 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 hello. It's just going back and forth.
Oh yeah, I never noticed. I don't know if I've heard it with headphones in a long time.
It kind of blew my mind at how much the mixing choices that he made were really interesting because he did stuff like that. But when you listen to songs that were obviously going to be like radio hits, they were kind of mixed that way. Like, you know, he starts out with the opening riff, the dead center and really small sounding. And then when the drums come in, the guitars just spread way out and get really wide and big. But you compare that to Butch Vig's version where he's got a little bit of chorus on the opening guitar. So it sounds wide right away. And then when it comes in, it just doesn't sound like it's that much wider or bigger, comparatively. But anything that's a hit, he's sort of doing things that mixers do for hits. Stereo pan guitars that are really wide. Everything has sort of a usual place in the mix. Mm-hmm. But then some of the other songs that I think he knew were like not hits. Like what was the one I was listening to? It's like Territorial Pissings or something like that, where the bass is really distorted. The bass is basically panned left and Kurt's guitars are panned right. So you're hearing Kurt's voice in the middle, drums middle, bass and guitar on left and right, which is not something you do a lot in hits. You know, like that's not really a pop technique. I mean, except for the Beatles or whatever, but that was like whatever.
Yeah, when they were just kind of experimenting and figuring it out, right?
But it's got a different sound. The stuff that I think he was anticipating on being hits, he mixed, I think, and treated a little different than some of the other songs that are a little more raw.
That's
even though Cobain hated all of it or whatever, the production on all of it. Which is, let me tell you this, which is really makes me really sad and kind of ticked off. Just kind of TO'd. Cause like, I love like the sonic quality of Nevermind. It still blows my mind to this day. However many years later, 30 years later, actually it is 30 years later.
Yeah.
It's like Kurt's voice was so powerful and so like you catch his voice and it just sounds awesome. And they left in Butch caught all the moments where his voice cut out and was really expressive and he had no voice left and he was just yelling or whatever in some songs. But like the moments that you double track Kurt's voice, it just sounds powerful. And like whatever Butch Vig got out of his guitar playing sounds huge and everything just sounds great. And Dave Grohl is probably one of the best smasher drummers out there, like just for playing big and loud and just having a good feel.
I've heard him talk about recording that with Butch Vig and how Butch Vig wanted him to play with a click track, and he'd never done that before, and he thought it was cheating. He had to kind of come around to that.
I could totally see that, but he nailed it, man. I mean, that whole thing just sounds sonically. It's one of my favorite sounding albums still to this day. Honestly, I feel like a lot of those bands in that era, their first albums, for somehow just, I love the sonic quality of almost everyone's breakout album. Maybe I'm a sellout. That's why I didn't make it. So I didn't make it big. I'm a sellout.
You think that's why?
No. Probably lack of talent, drive, focus, all that stuff.
It's a good point because I remember when all these bands came out and their first albums were so immersive, like you could just, it sounded like the sound was all around you, even if it was just coming out of a boombox speaker, right? It was just such a big sound. And then they would start to kind of I don't know. Like in retrospect, I think I understand something about the creative process now that I didn't understand then. Like they're maybe trying to focus their sound or find their voice, or whatever metaphor you want to use. And then their follow-up albums tend to become a little more focused and streamlined, and they lose that kind of visceral bigness, if that's a way to think about sound, because in terms of harmony, there's not a ton going on. There's a lot of cool modal moves that were interesting, because and did you do this in the 90s? Like when you were writing a song, you just wanted to find 4 chords that you had never heard together. You wanted to like find a brand new combination of 4 chords.
Yeah, isn't that so funny? In my dissertation, I wrote a whole section on how 90s rock has done that. There's a lot of I would disagree though. I think there's a lot of really interesting harmony stuff in that stuff that your ear, and like you're saying, it's almost like they didn't really, I don't think they really knew, really, obviously, because a lot of them weren't trained in the same sense that we were, but they just grabbed these amazing harmonies that,
well, yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply. I just meant like the sound, like the totality of the sound was somehow way bigger than the harmonies, because I would sit there and try to figure out these, and like Smells Like Teen Spirit. What is that? It's like I'm gonna have to cut out this part where I'm thinking about it, but it's like
1 4 flat 3 flat 6
flat 3. Is that it?
That's it. F B flat.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, keep going. You're on a thought here. I like it.
No, it's just those are interesting combinations. And I when I think back to classic rock, or even like doo-wop, 50s big bands, you think back in history, you don't hear those combinations of harmonies. So that's new and fresh. But there's still something even bigger about the way you feel like in your gut when you're listening to that album, Nevermind or Pearl Jam 10. Like you crank it up, and I think there's something more visceral about Nevermind than Pearl Jam, which we can talk about that later. But
no, I agree with that. And looking at those first albums, all of their first breakthrough albums, and again, I'm doing that thing with Nirvana where I discount Bleach, but maybe their first breakout album, they all definitely had more of a very harder rock vibe than what happened later. They all kind of lightened up over time. The biggies, maybe not Alice in Chains. They got more sludgier. That's like the way that I view Alice in Chains. They got more like, by the time you get to, what was the name of that album that came out in like 97? I think the last album before they...
Not Jar of Flies, right?
No.
After that one?
Yeah, it was the one that had... Hey. Na 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 na. Yeah.
Sounds like heroin.
I actually do not like that album. I've tried so many times to it's the one with Heaven Beside You.
Oh, yeah. I know.
I think it's just called Alice in Chains, the one with the 3-legged dog on it. I've tried so many times. That came out in 95. I can't believe it just came out in 95. But like, I mean, there's even a song called Sludge Factory. It just feels like they got more slower, grindier, and the harmonies got more bizarre in some ways. But like Alice in Chains, and I think in my mind, what I'm doing is I put all the albums that I experienced around the same time together in a group, like Pearl Jam 10, Soundgarden, Super Unknown. I mean, honestly, Metallica Black Album. These are like the early 90s. Alice in Chains with the one with Rooster, Dirt.
Yeah, Dirt.
Even though Facelift is amazing, but who else? Pearl Jam. And then, and like Stone Temple Pilots with Core. I mean, a lot of critics really don't like Core. I think they're idiots. I love Core. That album has so many great songs on it. And, they always use the words derivative. The critics love the word derivative. And then as and as Stone Temple Pilots progressed, they came into more of their own sound, like exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, that's right. But I think in that case, I prefer their later stuff. And
really, so I would take Core over any of their other stuff, and I love their other stuff. But I love
Interstate. It was Interstate. What's that album?
Purple.
Well, Plush is their first one, right?
Plush was on Core.
Purple.
Yeah, I love all their stuff. Dude, Core, Plush is such a great song. I mean, there's so many. Dead and Bloated. I mean,
that's true. I used to play Dead and Bloated on the guitar all the time.
Remember how awesome it was to hear? It's still so. You're talking about something that's visceral.
Yeah.
Crank up Dead and Bloated on a huge system, and he starts out with just his voice, and his voice is all bandpass filtered, and it sounds really small and a little gritty. And then when those snare drums come in, dun dun. It's like the biggest sound they captured.
I think he sang into the guitar pickups.
Really? I could see that. Yeah.
I'm not sure. It depends on the song. I know he did that on some of the songs, but
yeah, when Dead and Bloated comes in, it is amazing.
Is that the one? This is so bad. My memory is shot, man. The one I am da 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 da.
Yep.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember the chorus.
And here's something you and I might have in common that we're different maybe with critics or other people that are not primarily instrumentalists. I never listen to the words of songs. I like the meanings of the words rarely mean anything to me in a song. Are you the same way?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can't remember them anyway. I was trying to sing to my daughter yesterday. I was trying to sing Tomorrow from Annie. And I was just like, I was just saying the word tomorrow over and over. Like,
it's good because there's a lot of it in the song. You can get like half the song with that one word.
Right. Yeah.
I'm the same way. And this is where me and my wife are super different because she's a singer-songwriter. So for her, it starts with the words. And that's what I mean. So she cannot listen to Stone Temple Pilots because there's a line in it. I think in Dead and Bloated. No, it's in Plush where he says, when the dogs begin to smell her.
Yep.
She's like, I cannot listen to that line. She's like, that's just, I said, for me, this is what I hear. Like, I just hear the like sounds of it, not the actual meanings of the words. So I tend to view songs a little differently maybe than most people. There's more of us out there. I know it,
Yeah, there must be dozens of us.
Probably. Like the Never Nudes.
I was just thinking though, when we're talking about, I'm going to try to reframe something that we just talked about, which is that they start off really hard and sort of post-punk, right? Just this is where we get that word grunge from. It's like a distorted guitars, loud screaming, loud drums, and so on. And then they start to finesse their sound a little bit as they go. Maybe that's one way of thinking about it. But Nirvana never really had the chance to do that. You could maybe look at Dave Grohl's band. They became a little more precise is not the right word, but a little more focused. Foo Fighters, right?
Yeah, you forgot Foo Fighters somehow.
Yeah, I couldn't think of Foo Fighters. But then something like, Alice in Chains, who's like one of the harder of those bands, they did Jar of Flies, which is a remarkably quiet. I mean, in comparison to Dirt, it's lyrical and pretty, and the lyrics the lyrics are still sludgy, but then I think that I like that they. All right, so here's another way of framing it, and I'm going to cut out all my ums and stuff. It's a timbral thing. In Nirvana, for example, there's basically one timbre, and then sometimes there's textural differences where they, where the distorted guitar cuts out, like at the beginning of right before the verse starts on Smells Like Teen Spirit, and the guitar is just going right, and then there's some variation in texture, But then when I look at a band like Pearl Jam, there's so much more variety and timbre. And they can be hard and gritty. They can be clear and clean and lyrical. They can use the wah-wah pedal to great effect. There's a real funk influence. There's a classic rock feel. Like their guitars kind of sound different almost in every song. And I really dig that. I like that variety.
What's interesting, because I think that's one of the things you get with Nirvana is Kurt had such a specific sound in mind that even though he felt, I think, with Nevermind, he didn't achieve it, but he did achieve it with In Utero. It's like the singularity of his vision of what it should sound like is so prevalent. Like, I think there's a lot of different, like you were saying, the difference between like texture, like there are different textures in Nevermind. It's a song. Oh man, I can't remember. I never remember the names of songs, unfortunately. But where the distorted guitar has all these like chorusy effects on it, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, that was a thing.
That one. Anyway, but I don't know. Here's the thing. I think that in some ways, like I'm thinking about, I almost think of it on a higher level, like a meta thing. Like when I think about Pearl Jam 10, it's hard to get away from Pearl Jam 10 for me. Yeah. Or at least these mega albums that sort of set a trend. I mean, when you look at that, it's either they're playing Marshall Stacks. There it is. So subtle. So subtle. You got a pair of cutoffs under there too? Yeah, like Tobias?
Cargo shorts.
That's like the normal man's, the everyday dad's Tobias, not the cutoffs, but cargo shorts. Like Pearl Jam, their first album, 10, it was like all the drive tones were from big amps, like JCM 800, JCM 900 amps, like big distorted amps, right? Big crunchy sound, or like a totally clean amp, like when you think about maybe like a clean Fender. They're basically jumping between like a clean Fender sound and a big Marshall GCM 900 sound, right? Yeah. That was like 10. So when you look at like Alive, it's either or the verses where they're strumming those chords. Yeah. But then this is like what happened. Then after that album, they discovered like acoustic guitars and like small amp overdrive, like just cranking a Vox or cranking a Fender where you're getting some of that grit out of it. It's not as heavy as like the Marshall stuff was, right? But and for me that's in my mind, it's so funny. The main difference between what I call metal and what I call hard rock is whether they're playing out of a Marshall or a Mesa Boogie full stack, or they're playing out of a Vox or a Fender that's cranked up. Like they're just different worlds. Like when you think of Plush, all the guitars in that are big amps. Metallica, big amps, big 4x12 cabs, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. All the stuff in the 80s, all the metal in the 80s, big hot rodded Marshalls cranked up.
Yep.
Right? But then you get to like, grunge, Mudhoney or something where the sound of Mudhoney is like, I can't believe I'm bringing them up. I haven't even listened to them in years. I'm not even a Mudhoney fan, really. But when you think about the sound, it's like cranked up combos that it's distorted, but it's not like saturated.
Yeah, right.
So it breathes a lot more, and that I feel like that's the difference when you get to like Pearl Jam's second album. And I wonder if it has to do with, I wonder how long they developed and wrote and recorded 10, right? Because a lot of guys in that era that they're doing their first album, all of it's fleshed out beforehand, right? They've got their sound, and then they go in to record it in like a month or a couple of weeks, right? So it's like, we're not going to experiment. These are the sounds that we have. When I play live, I'm either playing through my Marshall or a Fender. And then their second album's like, wow, we got some budget. We can actually write in the studio. We got a lot more time to flesh sounds out. Now we can be more interesting. And now Pearl Jam stuff is like wild. The second album, right? Wasn't it Versus? I mean, Daughter, going from even Flow to Daughter, or even on Elderly Pearl Jam
Elderly woman behind a counter in a small town. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love those songs. I love them. They're just, it's like, for me, it's almost a completely different band. Even though, like, so it's like, even comparing the softer stuff on 10, right? The later cuts, like Porch and Oceans.
Garden.
Those still have that type of, like, maybe Fender or like Roland, like the solid state Roland amps with like chorus on it, right? It was still very electric guitar, like clean sound, but like lots of reverb and effects. And then you get to the clean sounds of later albums and it sounds more organic, less effecty, more variant. Then you get to the hard rock stuff of their later albums, like Not For You. It just still sounds like they're cranking little amps and just killing a really dry drum sound. Like, listen to Not For You and it's just like bone dry.
Yep.
Then you compare that to infamously 10 having reverb on everything. They're like, should we just put it on the main bus? Yes.
That's where I developed my sound, though. I mean, I remember in grad school, like when I realized I didn't have to write classical music, I could be influenced by the music that I listened to. Because I grew up playing a piano, so I knew Beethoven and Bach and Chopin and that stuff. But I didn't listen to it. When I listened to music, it was Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Guns N' Roses and all that stuff is really saturated. And so when I the first thing I thought to do was, well, I just need a whole bunch of alto instruments. Like I want to write a piece for viola, alto flute, French horn, cello, and piano because I wanted it as dark as possible. And then I realized I could start like adding compression and reverb. I could mic acoustic instruments and just put those effects on them so that it sounded like the albums I was listening to. So anyway, now even when I'm doing when I record anything now or when I'm composing in a DAW, I mean, I'm reverbing everything. Sometimes I'll put 2 or 3 different reverbs on a track.
That's a lot of reverbs.
You know this too, because I just bought a reverb pedal for my guitar, and I'm like, I'm gonna need at least 2 more for different sort of parts of the signal chain.
I think that's the thing that you and I have in common in some ways is that like it took me a long time to try and figure out in my mind how the influences that I had growing up could make its way into my own creative work. You know, I mean, some people do it like Bang on a Can. I always think it's kind of pretentious to. I'm sorry. I mean, I know none of the guys on Bang on a Can or even like Bang on a Can will probably ever listen to anything we ever say. But you know, you hear like, man, it's like rock and roll, and you hear it, it just sounds like kind of like really hip rhythms, but still with. It's like they went from 100% classical to 90% classical with 10% appropriation from like rhythms from rock, you know, and you're like. This is not what I was thinking when I was thinking this would be like actual, like more like rock, like something in there that's rock. And now I haven't listened to everything. Maybe it's in there more than the stuff that I have been introduced to.
I know what you mean. I think though that things like Bang on a Can or David Lang, his the Matchstick Girl Passion that won the Pulitzer like 12 years ago or something.
Oh, yeah, so long ago now.
You know, when I would listen to that, and I'd realize, I mean, obviously the timbre is different, but it sounds simple in a way, like in a because the music I was being trained to write was very complex harmonically, and so I liked the sort of post minimalism of Bang on a Can, and I also realized I didn't have to write complex harmonies.
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny is, and I've never been a super complex composer, and I've never been a super complex, I don't know, thinker, you know, when I think about music or when I write it or strategize it or whatever. I think that's why, like, whenever I'd analyze music, like, you know, throughout all of your studies, you take analytics class or, you know, whatever. I always chose pieces that were accessible to a part of my brain where I could understand it. You know what I mean? So I wasn't choosing Boulez. I wasn't choosing, oh my gosh, I just lost his name. Babbitt, you know, Babbitt with his like 24 double matrixed row. I'm like, oh my gosh, just if I have to like dig into this too much, I'm gonna die. I love Webern because it was like a puzzle you were trying to solve in a very interesting and creative way,
and fairly transparent. You look at a Webern score. First of all, it's not that long. It's texturally pretty thin, just little motives here and there, and I think it kind of reveals itself pretty quickly. I like Webern a lot,
and it's fun. It's like fun to dig into. I go into it with the mentality of like, hey, this is a cool puzzle that I can figure out, or a maze I can navigate, and it's all there. I know it's all there, and you can see the threads and figure out the threads. I was never able to figure out threads in like Milton Babbitt. I love Milton Babbitt. I grew to really like him later, but I've still never analyzed a piece of his.
Yeah,
because I'm just.
Yeah, I had to analyze semi-simple variations in my master's, and it was a lot of fun. It wasn't. You could do it. It was fine.
I could do it.
But he taught Sondheim. He was one of Sondheim's composition teachers, and Babbitt loves Broadway and show tunes and stuff. So I had to write for a concert at North Texas. I had to write program notes, and there was a Babbitt piece on the program. And so I just talked all about his like influence on Sondheim and his love of show tunes. And I didn't mention anything about the other stuff.
That's okay. That's par for the course when a composer writes something for something. But getting back to it, but the stuff that I ended up really, once I embraced some of that stuff, like especially later in my PhD and especially for my dissertation, like even to a almost parody level. I mean, I remember you saying that about my dissertation one time, like, man, this progression's kind of cheesy, like, or whatever, like, but he's like, you said you liked it. It was like, this is, it's a rock progression. I put a lot of,
but I don't think I would have said it like that out of context.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if I said it was cheesy, I didn't mean, first of all, it's probably the wrong word, but what I meant is it's something. All right. So I'm really fascinated with taking simple materials and then doing something really profound with them. Right. So if you take a simple piece or a simple chord progression, but then you perform it out of phase, or you mess around with the voicing or the dynamic. I don't know. There's like all kinds of ways. It doesn't have to be. So the chord progression itself might have been cheesy, but I just feel like I wasn't saying that the music was cheesy.
No, yeah, and that's what I was trying to get around to. It was more like, like some guitar riff we wrote that was like,
yeah.
I open it up so that whoever's playing it could come up with their own guitar riff, right? And the one we chose, I really liked, but on its own, it sounds like a rock, kind of a lot. The idea was that even the stuff I wrote, I really liked, but was still kind of generic. It still had to call back to like, this is a rock riff. I even in the score wrote names of bands and songs to reference. This is the type of sound I want. I think I even used the chorus for Alive in the score. Oh wow. But yeah, I think starting to embrace that, it really opened up a world of like, I love how this sounds. I do personally, and I actually just recently re-listened. Is that even a thing? Listened to my dissertation all the way through, which I hadn't done for, I don't know, 6 years. And I was like, man, I love the progressions that we chose, that the band that we, I wrote a lot of them, but some of them were opened up to the band. I was like, I like how all this sounds. You can definitely hear the influence in that.
And it's so loud. I mean, yeah, and not all the way. Obviously, there's quiet moments too, but it is just one of the, talk about a wall of sound. I love that piece for that reason, among others, but I love how loud it is. And I mean, you hear that in your music. Obviously, you're saying like Bang on a Can's doing it 90%. You're definitely, it's more like 90% rock and 10% classical.
Yeah. Well, it's because I felt like I was always never fully in the classical camp. And I was never really good at writing music.
When did you start guitar?
I know this exact date. I bought my first guitar in July of 95. because I scratched onto the pick guard July 95.
Oh, nice.
I thought I was destined to be like a guitar player in a band. That was my sole goal in high school, was to I grew up near Spokane, Washington. It was to graduate, move to Seattle, start a band, be in a rock band. That was my whole goal. That was what I was going to do with my life.
I didn't know that. I've known you for a long time.
July of 95.
So where's Kurt Cobain from? Aberdeen. Aberdeen, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that? How far is that from Spokane?
It's the other side of the state, Eastern Washington. It's a lot closer to Seattle. Spokane's like 5 hours from Seattle.
Right, but I thought that Kurt was from that eastern side of Washington.
No, it's still Western Washington. Let me look though.
But I mean, you were in the neighborhood, right? It wasn't like I grew up in North Carolina, and I remember my dad. We were always sort of romanticizing Seattle and wanting to go to Seattle and drop
everyone
out of school and he was joking that when he was a kid it was San Francisco. That's where everyone wanted to go in the 60s, and then in the 90s it was Seattle.
Totally. Okay, so Aberdeen is basically on a little inlet.
Oh yeah.
From all the way western on the beach on the coastline.
It's all the way. Okay, I thought it was back the other direction. But what do I know?
Yeah, so it's, I don't know. Let's see. What's my scale right now? It's maybe an hour and a half from Seattle.
Hey, I'm looking on Google Maps. They have a Kurt Cobain Under the Bridge Memorial.
I saw that. I wonder if it's like under the bridge in It's Always Sunny. Under the boardwalk. Go under the boardwalk.
I haven't seen that episode in forever. I was thinking of Cricket.
Oh yeah,
when he has to reproduce the poop.
Oh yeah. My favorite moment in that episode is Artemis's face when she walks in before the other women do, and Charlie is squatting, and they're all looking at Charlie. And Artemis is already, and it cuts to Artemis has already clearly been standing there for several seconds with this like look of like quizzical delight. She's like, "What do we got going here, boys?" "Oh, hey!" And Charlie goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Nothing. Nothing. We're not doing anything."
And then when Dee wants to leave to go do her Sex and the City thing, Artemis is like, "I'm gonna stay here."
Yeah.
She was so fascinated.
She's my favorite. I think in that whole show, she's my favorite reoccurring character. And she's played so well by Artemis. Isn't that her name in real life?
Oh.
Isn't Artemis's name Artemis? Thought it was.
Check this out.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
No.
That's the Kurt Cobain Memorial.
Is that someone sleeping under there?
Yeah, it looks like it. I think that's Cricket.
Cricket.
I think Cricket's my favorite. Did you ever see the one in one of the later seasons where they say a cricket's tail or something?
Yeah, is that where like he tries to work for his dad's business?
Yes.
And his brother's there and he hates his brother or whatever? I started that one recently and I didn't get through it.
Makes me so sad. It's a really well done one, and not like one of the laugh a minute out loud episodes.
He's good. That actor is good. I always forget his name. What is his name?
Dave Cricket.
Dave Cricket. He was also in Mythic Quest.
Yeah. Did you know he's married to Bones? TV's Bones?
What?
Emily Deschanel.
Wow. So he's like one degree away from Zoe.
Yeah, I bet they see each other at family get-togethers.
That's funny.
What is his Hornsby? David Hornsby.
David Hornsby, yeah. Oh my gosh, he's good. Okay, where are we at? Oh, back to guitar. Yes, back to guitars. My first guitar was a Squier Strat, black with white pickguard. And actually, I bought the same one
Dude, that was my first guitar.
Yep. Well, this isn't it. I played so much. Squire necks are so cheap. I played through the neck, like the frets were worn down, and so it's all. I still have it. It's all broken up. But a few years ago, I bought this, which is basically almost exactly the same, except for it's got a maple neck instead of a rosewood neck, and this is an American-made one.
That's a Fender label, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, mine was a Squire.
Yep. I don't play this guitar as much as I should, but it's classic, man. It's a classic guitar.
And I had a little practice amp. What was the brand? It starts with the C.
Carvin?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Are those
Cort? There's another one. C-O-R-T.
There's a
Carvin
one.
Yeah, you should look that up. I bought the accompanying Squire amp, the Squire Bullet amp.
Nice.
It was 2 channels that you had to push a button on. So I would play it like clean and then push the button real quick to switch to the drive. Solid state little thing. Man, I love that guitar. I played through the neck of that thing. My dad can fix stuff, which is not a gift I have. We like modded it a whole bunch. We put humbuckers in it. We put a Floyd Rose in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine had one of those tremolo bars.
Yeah.
So much fun. Like when I watch people like Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix, the way that they use those is incredible, right?
Have you seen the big 3 in my mind of the G3 tour of the late 90s, which was Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and Eric Johnson? Vai and Satriani are incredible with the whammy bar. With they'll hit like a harmonic and then move the bar around and play a melody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Insane.
And all these dive bombs and stuff. Yeah.
Crate. That was the yeah.
Oh my gosh, what's funny is that was my second amp.
Really?
Yeah, I was so dumb, man. I was so dumb. I'd work in the summers farming, make a whole bunch of money, and buy equipment with it, which was also dumb in some ways. But I bought my first big amp. I bought a Crate solid state full stack. And
wow, how big was that?
It was 2 4x12 cabinets. It was taller than me. And it was solid state, which is not good. You want the tubes.
Yeah.
And so,
but the solid state was the sound, right? I mean,
no. In the 80s, the solid state amps came out more in the 80s, and they sound really sterile.
Yeah.
And kind of fake. And I remember I had that amp, and I remember I bought it. I was so dumb. Why didn't I think about this? Because it was so hard to get the amp home in a car, because that's all we had were cars in the winter. We like got it in the car, drove all the way home, and then I pulled it out, cranked it up, and was immediately had buyer's remorse. And I never thought I didn't know I could take it back. I never took it back. I just kept it.
Oh.
And then before my senior year, I was in Spokane playing at a used guitar shop. They had a Mesa Boogie, and I was playing metal, right? And I played a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier. And I was like, this is amazing. And the dude that worked there was like this consignment shop off of this other store that I'd always go to. It was like basically heaven for gear, because there was like 2 guys there. No one ever went there. And the guy was like, I was playing through Mesa Boogie dual recto with a 412 cab. They had like the side armor on it, the diamond plated side armor on it. That was sort of the Mesa look. And he's like, dude, if you want to take it home and try it, you just fill out a piece of paper. I'm like a 17-year-old kid. I just signed a piece of paper and took it home for 2 days and played it. And it was like, I want this. So I basically put my amp in for consignment to them and paid the difference or whatever and bought that. And it was like, when I played metal in college and stuff, everything was a Mesa. I love the Mesa sound.
Yeah. But how much was that? How much was that full stack?
The full stack I bought for like $1,200.
How old were you?
Like 16.
Can't believe I could never even imagine that much money when I was 16.
Well, I would work all summer I would work farming,
Yeah. No, I mean,
10-hour days.
I made the money, but every time I get paid, I go down to the mall and buy clothes or CDs, or I was into model airplanes. So I bought a lot of model airplanes.
Yeah, that sounds real geeky. We didn't have malls where I was from. And I mean, we could go to them, but there was literally nothing to spend money on. And I was so focused. This may have been the height of focus in my life was high school, and I completely lost it afterwards. But I wanted to be a rock and roll, like a band guy, a rock and roll guy. I was like, I'm so that I can buy a new guitar amp or whatever, I mean, I had a PlayStation and stuff or whatever, but weirdly enough, I never bought a guitar. I just kept that same Strat that we just kept modding over and over.
Yeah, why not?
And then I bought that amp, and then I had the Mesa, and then I went to college with the Mesa and played both in a metal band and a ska band at the same time.
Did you play trombone? Why do I think that?
I did play trombone too, yeah.
In the ska band?
No, played guitar in the ska band. I played trombone in high school and in jazz band and stuff, and then in college in the marching band for 3 years.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, this seems like let's do this. Any more parting thoughts? I don't know. Maybe we should have a segment.
I'm sorry, you cut out. A segment on what?
Oh, I mean, should we have segments? Should we have like a parting thought segment or whatever? Because who knows how long this thing is? We've been going for days, it seems like.
Yeah.
I also don't know. I also don't think this episode's going to air anywhere. I think this should probably be our first test episode.
Okay.
Don't you think? I don't know.
I'm going to upload it later tonight.
Okay, so it's not. It's exactly.
Well, I mean,
not that at all.
We'll cut it down, but I think there's some cool stuff in the beginning that we can chop up and make into like an opening sequence. We need some music though.
Oh yeah. Did you have something? Do you want to make a beat and send it over to me?
Actually, yeah, I think it's on my laptop. No, where did I know I must have recorded it in this room, so I'll find it and send it to you. You want to hear it?
Yeah, send it. Let's hear it.
All right, hold on.